how to take your custom measurements and to see what size trouser pattern you will fit in to be the best closest to your size. This is Tania Sutherland. As a fashion designer, and I do a lot of garments for my clients, I always have to make sure that my patterns fit according to their body measurements and their proportions, and also as close as possible so they come for less and less fittings. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to take your custom measurements for a trouser. So let's get started. We're going to be taking our body measurements specifically for a trouser garment. So let's have a look at what the measurements that we're going to be requiring. It's a good idea to stand in front of a mirror so that you can actually see your body proportions in front of you and you're not folding over when you're trying to check your measurements. By looking in the mirror, you can actually see what you are doing. So the first measurement would be your waist, which normally you find it's usually the smallest area of the waistline. You can actually take your tape measure and you can wiggle it and you'll find where it lodges itself. That's usually where your waistline is. Or you can fold in half, and where the fold line of the body is, you come up, that is your true waistline. So you're going to take your waist measurement and you're going to write that down. The next one will be your tummy. So I like to just measure over the navel area and make sure your tape measure is nice and straight. Go along the tummy where the navel is and write that down. The following measurement would be your first hip. You usually can feel the first part of the bone, which is your hip bone right at the top here. You place your tape measure, keep your feet together and measure along your first hip. Now your second hip is your fullest hip. Now on your commercial patterns, when they indicate hip, they're normally indicating this hip measurement. I always like to include a few more measurements to make my garments fit me, more custom fit, especially that I do make garments for clients. I want to fit their body proportions. They feel more confident wearing the clothes that I design and make for them. So the following one will be your fullest hip, which is usually closest to the crotch line. You take that measurement, make sure that your tape measure is dead straight. You need to take your thigh measurement. Now this would be necessary if the trouser is rather fitted or more tailored. If it's a very flowing, loose, wide leg, then maybe it won't be necessary, but I always like to take those extra measurements. So your thigh measurement is usually about 2 or 3 fingers from measuring from the crotch line. This is usually the widest area of your thigh. So take your thigh measurement, keep the measurement straight, and make sure that it's straight. Look in the mirror that it's dead straight, take that measurement. The last measurement would be your waist to the hemline of your trouser. So I normally like to put the 1 at the bottom of my tape measure and the highest number up to my waist, and then I will basically drop it on the floor. If I'm going to be wearing a heel, I'll stand slightly on my toes and then it'll touch the ground or on the top of my foot, taking that measurement. So these are the basic measurements we're going to be requiring. So these are the full circumference measurements we're taking. We still need to add in ease and then work out your quarter measurement. As you know, commercial patterns are divided into quarter measurements because you're looking at a trouser, for instance. The front will say cut 2 times material and the back will say also cut 2 times. That's giving you 4 panels. So we are taking our measurement and we're dividing them into 4 panels. So we can take 1 panel, which is the front, work out the measurement that we want so we know what sizes to trace, and exactly the same repeating for the back trouser. Alright, so now I've selected a trouser pattern and I've just taken the McCall's 3724 and I'm now going to basically check what is my measurements. I've taken out the pattern pieces, I've taken out the front, the back, the pockets and the waistband. So I'm going to just place the pocket onto the front. going to follow the little notches and the little rings. So now I can see the full side seam of the pattern. If I draw it in, you can see it's coming through. Okay, so when you look at your trouser, it normally does give you some kind of measurements. So we're going to have a look to see what this trouser tells us. Here it tells me that it's got a 12, 14, 16, and 18, and it gives me different hip measurements. So you need to look at what is your fullest hip measurement. So mine is 98 centimeters, and with ease it's 102. So let's have a look at the first measurement. Let's look at your second hip. Let's go down to the fullest area. So your second hip is your full measurement plus 4 centimeter ease, which is your 4 centimeters is about 1.5 inch. That you're adding to the measurement, and you divide it by 4. So mine comes to 25.5. So the first thing you do now is you have a look at the center front of your trouser. Here's my center front line, and that is my cutting line. I'm going to take my tape measure, and I'm going to measure 25.5 because I'm working without seam allowance. I'm going to place it on the center front line, going across where the hip line is indicated according to the pattern. I'm going to take it over, and if I lie this over, and you'll see that my tape measure ends exactly on a 12, but I still need to include 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So my hip on this pattern is actually a size 14. So I'm going to make a note on my sheet of measurements that my second hip, that's my front, is a size 14. So it's all about making clothes to fit you like they were made for you, because you want to feel absolutely confident in what you are making. And also when people can see that you're confident in what you are making, that they will approach you to make clothes for them. And this is definitely a way for you to start, your own little business and start custom making clothes for other people as well. So it's about getting the fit correct with your body first. You can understand your body. It'll be easier for you to understand clients' bodies, how you can adjust the pattern according to their measurements. You don't have to draft patterns from scratch. You can use a commercial pattern and just make the necessary adjustments, adaptations on the pattern to fit anyone's measurements. Now, if you really enjoy this kind of content, how about giving me some love to help me grow my algorithms? I'd really appreciate that very much. If you could please, press the like button, share, as well as the subscribe button, so you can stay in the loop, because every Friday I'll bring out a video, something to do about sewing or sewing and fashion business, anything to do with the sewing industry, as well as fashion design, and of course the business. That's my front, is a size 14. So now I'm going to go up 10 centimeters from my hip measurement, and I'm going to measure 10 centimeters up, because that's approximately where your first hip sits. That is a universal measurement. So I'm going to measure my first hip measurement, which is, the natural is 87 centimeters, with ease is 91, that's including my 4 centimeter seam allowance. So now my quarter scale is 23. Once again, place it on your center front line, marking 10 centimeters up. Now, if I have to look at this, I take the pocket and I put it onto a size 12 position, because there is my true side seam. I'm just going to place that down. and my 10 centimeters up from my crotch line. That's my fullest hip, is there. Let's measure again. 23 centimeters, my quarter measurement from center front going over. So here is a 12, and here is 1.5 centimeters seam, so I'm a size 14 tummy. So my tummy, so I'm a size 14 first hip. So my first hip is a size 14 on the front. So my tummy area, if we go up about 5 centimeters from that first hip, that's approximately where your tummy area is, where your navel is sitting. This is universal measurement. It can vary, but this is basically universal. When all our patterns are made, we work on sort of universal measurements. Tummy is 81 centimeters plus 4 centimeter ease is 85. I divided it by 4, I'm getting 21.5. I'm going to lay that measurement on my center front, on the stitching line of the pattern, carrying it over. And once again, my tummy line ends on a 12, but I still need to add my seam allowance, so that is a size 14. So my tummy is a size 14. When you make your trouser and you got your waist pattern, so if I'm cutting out a size 14 on my trouser line, I need to trace a size 14 waistband. So in this case, I will trace a size 14, not a size 12, to make sure it fits into this size 14 diameter size that I need to trace off. We'll have a look at your thigh measurement. So your thigh measurement is basically, let's say, where the bottom of your crotch line, about 3 fingers approximately from your crotch line. That is the area you're going to measure for your thigh. So my thigh was 55 centimeters plus a 3 centimeter seam allowance, so a little bit less than the full body. And then divided by 2, I get 29. So if I take 29 centimeters and I place it within the seam allowance of the 12, and even with the 14, there is lots of movement there for me, so it's not going to be too tight. So I'm quite happy that it will fit my thigh measurement. And then you would need to measure your waist down to your hemline. So in this case, if I have to take the waistband and I fold it in half, because that is what the pattern suggests, and that's going to be stitched onto my trouser. And it's 1.5 centimeter seam allowance and 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So if I line that up approximately, giving me a guideline. So this will be my waistline I can measure from there all the way down to how long I want my trouser to be. So I would like my trouser to be 108. But I also need to add seam allowance. So I need to add on at least 3 centimeters, depending on how wide I want my hem allowance to be. So I'll work on this line over here, which is the 18 line. And I'll just make a note that I need to take 13 centimeters off pattern for my hemline. I'm going to repeat the same steps for the back. I will leave the links down below of the patterns that I have for my trousers. The one is called an Eve trouser, which is a more comfortable fit. And then I have the other one called Ayla, which is more fitted with the tapered leg. So have some fun. Check out my patterns on my website. So I know that this line over here, which indicates on the front of the trouser, is my crotch line. So I'm going to use this for my crutch, for my full hip measurement. Once again, I'll go to my second hip, which is my fullest hip. So it's 98 plus 4 centimeter ease, 102 divided by 4 is 25.5. I'm going to measure 25.5 on my tape measure, and I'm going to go to my center back crutch line, but I'm not going to measure on the cutting line. I'm going to measure in 1.5 centimeters. That's my stitching line. Carry my tape measure over, and then when I look at my back, I'm actually so I'll measure my measurement plus add my 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So now on my back trouser, my second hip is a size 12. If you have a very big bum, then I would rather you take the size 14 for the back and the 12 for the front if you see that your back pattern is smaller. If you have got quite a big tummy, then rather go for the bigger size in the front and the smaller size in the back. Also, if you have a flat bum as well, keep the back smaller. So as you can see in this case, the back is a smaller size than the front. You can see here is your stitching line. So follow the stitching line. I'm going to measure now 10 centimeters up for my first hip, and my first hip is 23 centimeters with my quarter scale. So 23 centimeters on my stitching line of my center back, taking it over, then adding in my 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. I'm a size 12. So my first hip is a size 12. I'm going to measure my tummy area, which is 21.5. I'm going to measure on the stitching line. If I add my seam allowance, my tummy is also, my back's a 12 and my front is a 14. I will still go ahead and cut a size 14 waistband. When I try on my trouser, I will make the fitted adjustments accordingly to fit my body once I actually put it together. I like to also put a center back seam in my waistband as well as in the back. You can see there's a nice curve. So you can always adjust if you have got quite a small waist or a curved or a sway back. You can always adjust your center back seam in your waistband than having a straight band. So the same thing would be for the length of the trouser. You would just mark off your 13 centimeters off at the bottom, and that would be your length of your pattern for your front and your back.